It helps to line and protect the stomach. That's what the mucus does. And the acid is actually helpful for digesting food groups, especially proteins.
Kind of antagonist to each other, just breaking it down with the acids.
Yeah, it is kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? Yeah, in a way. And plus, the parietal cells, it's really protecting itself from that. Yeah, but you're right. It's kind of protecting itself from its own secretion. The next type of cell is called a parietal cell. Parietal cells, you'll notice here, release hydrochloric acid. HCl is hydrochloric acid. Different textbooks will give you different values, but I'm always finding the value to be somewhere about a pH of 0, 1, or 2. And if you're thinking in terms of the pH scale, that is a very strong acid. So hydrochloric acid is very acidic. There's another item here secreted by your parietal cells. It's called intrinsic factor. Okay, let's talk about the hydrochloric acid first. On your worksheet, you'll notice that hydrochloric acid, of course, makes your stomach acidic. Certain food groups require acid for digestion. Proteins are really complex. Some proteins are polypeptides, quaternary level structure. They're really difficult to break down, so an acid environment in the stomach is helpful for degrading those proteins. So that's one reason we need the hydrochloric acid, is to begin the protein digestion. How do we do it? Notice the next word there. We activate something called pepsin. Pepsin will normally sit inactive in a form called pepsinogen. Notice that pepsinogen transforms into pepsin when there's an acid pH in the stomach. So, let's say that you have not had anything to eat today at all. Your last meal was perhaps last night. So, right now, pepsinogen is sitting there in your stomach in its inactive form. If for lunch you go downstairs to Chick-fil-A and you have a chicken sandwich, now that chicken sandwich, the presence of it in your digestive system will actually cause pepsinogen to transform into what? Pepsin. But if you want to transform pepsinogen into pepsin, you have to have an acid pH in your stomach. So it's kind of a twofold kicker here. You have to have acid present, and pepsinogen has to transform into pepsin for you to start the breakdown of those proteins. Intrinsic factor is the second issue here. It's a glycoprotein. Glycoprotein means it's a sugar and a protein hooked together. This one's required for vitamin B12 absorption in the small intestine. Mental note here, even though intrinsic factor is secreted in the stomach, we're not going to do anything with it right now. We're going to let it go on into the small intestine, and the small intestine will absorb it. So that's going to be something that's key here for red blood cell formation. That's why intrinsic factor is important. We need it to make vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is important for red blood cell formation.
So vitamin, it's a B12 injection, that's what they call it?
In essence, yeah. Yeah, for anemia or other issues where you have low red blood cell count.
That's the one that's supposed to give you energy, right?
Supposedly, because I guess if you've got more red blood cells, you can transport more oxygen. Yeah. What's that?
Well, I'm saying you can get it.
Does it? I guess if you're making more red blood cells, it in turn makes you feel like you're more. Yeah. Yeah. It is absorbed in the small intestine, right?
What did I say? The intrinsic factor?
Yeah, the intrinsic factor helps absorb B12 in the small intestine. Okay, so far what we've had Neck cells make acid mucus. Parietal cells make hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid activates pepsinogen into pepsin. What does pepsin break down? Protein, okay. And then, of course, intrinsic factor is necessary for B12. B12 and intrinsic factor, we're going to deal with them in the small intestine. So we're going to secrete it here in the stomach, but absorb that stuff in the small intestine. The next on your list is the chi cells. The chi cells actually secrete pepsinogen.
Pepsinogen sits in your stomach inactive.
Inactive.
And the chi cells help produce pepsinogen.
Yes, the chi cells produce the pepsinogen, but the acid from the parietal cells will activate it and turn it into pepsin. Yeah. What a complicated mess, right? So let's think about that for just a moment. You can have chi cells making pepsinogen all day, every day, but unless your parietal cells convert pepsinogen into pepsin, there's not going to be protein digestion. So you're relying on both of these cells to kind of work together to not only make the stomach acidic, but also to transform pepsinogen into pepsin so we can start the digestion of what? Protein, right. So people who take, what do they call them, acid pump reducers, things like Pepsid, so you can see that Pepsid or any kind of those hydrogen pump reducers, they decrease the amount of hydrochloric acid in the stomach. What do you think that ultimately does to their chances of digesting protein? Also decreases them, right. And interestingly, you know, any of that mucus that you swallow from your nasal cavity that's contaminated and full of bacteria, it travels to the stomach where the acid juices actually degrade that mucus. So for people who take one of those proton pump inhibitors, like, you know, Acidex or Pepsid or anything of that sort, they may actually have more infections because they don't have enough acid in their stomach to get rid of all that contaminated mucus. Alright, let's see. We don't have an enteric endocrine cell on this particular picture, but you'll notice it's the last of the list. And those enteric endocrine cells are releasing hormones such as gastrin. Gastrin helps to spur on the release of gastric juices, so as the name gastrin implies, it's going to be released by the stomach. So I don't have a picture of those enteric endocrine cells, but literally these are endocrine cells that line the stomach. So back in chapter 16, when we covered all those endocrine glands, we never mentioned the stomach as an endocrine gland, but now you can add the stomach to our list since it does secrete gastrin.
And the parietal cell converts pepsin.
The hydrochloric acid released by the parietal cell converts pepsinogen to pepsin.
You have a gastrin produces the gastric juices.
Right. Gastrin produces the gastric juices. I just want to mention something too. Out of all of our organ systems, this system is one that we consider to be external to our body. What do we mean by being external?
About the digestive system?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of just takes place on its own.
Yes, because
Everything that we do, I guess, affecting everything that we eat or consume, that would make it external.
it is in a way involuntary, but think about the food that passes through your body. The only contact it has with your body is through the digestive pathway. So the food that's absorbed into your system now becomes internalized, but essentially we consider your digestive system to be external in a way because it's not necessarily, you know, even though it's inside your body, it is just a gut passageway through your body. So in essence, it's an external system because it does contact things that come in from the outside world. Just wanted to give you another shot of the lining of the stomach. Notice that mucosa up there. There are gastric pits that indent deep into the mucosa. These are glands down here that secrete things like, mucus in the submucosal lining. And then we have muscularis externa deep to that layer. So this gives you another view through that stomach